Welcome back to the Private Practice Playbook. On today's episode, Jay is diving into one of his favorite topics, how to have your best year ever. Not by chance, not by luck, but by design. He'll walk you through why most business owners struggle to consistently create their best year, how you can break that cycle, and why the fourth quarter is the most critical time to get intentional about next year. If you want 2026 and beyond to be the best years of your career and your life, this conversation is for you. Let's get started.
It's the Private Practice Playbook. It's the Private Practice Playbook.
All right, welcome. So today I want to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is how to have your best year ever. And I was thinking a lot about this in the sense of, I wonder if you went back, let's say 30 years, and you asked yourself the question, was every year a better year? And, you may be young, so 30 is not the number. Maybe it's 7 years or it's 6 years or, and then you may have some beliefs about, what do you mean my best year ever, right? So obviously you could have your best year in relationships, you could have your best year in physical health, you could have your best year in education. So, lots and lots of things that you could do. But specifically today, I want to talk about when you're a business owner and you run a practice. And, so the question is, I started reflecting on this and I was like, why is it that this topic is so easy for me to talk about? And then I realized that it's that pretty much, with the exception, of a few years, pretty much every year has always been my best year. And sometimes I'll allocate my energies to making it the best year in something else, but I have refined a system around this, and it starts now, meaning let's say you're listening to this sometime at the end of 2025, or maybe there's 90 days or 60 days left to go. And this is the first problem. Everybody wants to wait, and they want to talk about, that you're going to wait until it's New Year's Eve and January 1st, and you set some weird little goals that, people don't keep for any more than 2 weeks. And so they haven't perfected the craft. It's actually a craft, right? As a business owner, you have to be you're like the beacon of aspiration for the team too. So, you have to have a system. And what's cool about this is once you learn the system, you get to repeat it every single year. And I just love the fact that the truth is that the business calendar is the same as the regular calendar, but it has a couple of nuances. But, in the fourth quarter of every year, you have to start thinking about what it's going to take to have your best year. And I think a lot of people, in dentistry or in practice, people don't use quarters that much. It's more of like a corporate-y type thing. They're, for instance, if you want to get a good deal, you should always call a company. If it's like a publicly traded company, you call them the last day of the quarter, and they're really hot to make you a deal. And then the minute the quarter flips over, if they can't post it to the previous quarter, you're going to get less of a deal. So, and the benefit is that you can kind of think about it as 4 quarters, right? And so we all know, if you like sports at all, there's nothing better than when your team comes out in the first quarter of a game and is just dominant. But you also know it's a long game, right? And so you see a lot of cool things happen in the first quarter of a game. And then obviously the last quarter is another one that, can be pretty shocking, right? You see things turn around. So the question, for you is this, have you had your best year ever every year? And is it something that you chose to control, or was it something that happened by accident? And, I thought a lot about this, and it isn't a solo strategy, right? For instance, it's kind of I've always loved the idea of tell me the rules of the game and just then let me go play the game. And this is one of the rules of the game of having a business, is that as a business owner, you've got to, in the fourth quarter, you have so many demands, right? It's like you're heading for holidays. So, your spouse or maybe saying, hey, we need to plan what we're going to do here, for Thanksgiving or for Christmas or whatever it is. Your kids might be off, grandkids, and then you're fading because it's the fourth quarter. And then you have to do all these financial things that are tax oriented, meaning that you have to be conscientious of, have you paid your taxes, and, how much money are you going to make, and do you have enough money to pay the taxes? And everyone's coming after you at the year end, buy this, buy this, you can depreciate this. And so that's what makes the fourth quarter of the year so invigorating, but it's only invigorating if you understand the game. So I almost start to I get excited, right? And so this year we're going to do an event, and the event, it's a 2-day event, and it is on how to have your best year ever. Now, we're going to do it in early December. But what I'm going to do in that 2 days is I'm going to break out how the science of having your best year ever. And it is very much like a clock, like you have a process, right? A patient comes in, we get them checked in, we move them to the chair, it's like a process, right? This person comes in. So having your best year ever requires a set of diagnostic tools that I'm going to go over. And there are 5 major areas that will determine your growth. And so, meaning that as the business owner, you have to understand these 5 areas, and you have to make it super simple. And then you have to prioritize, because we only have so much time. So we have to prioritize, and we have to figure out also how on earth, what's so hard about running a business is when you have to do self-assessment of your business, right? It's always because the self-assessment is always wrong. So we've got to get it down to a mathematical equation. So there are actually mathematical formulas, which I'll show you in these 2 days, that basically tell you exactly what you need to do. And I'm not talking about you logged into your software system and saw that your fees were a little low. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about substantial formulas regarding, where to apply pressure, and then what data point would tell you that you applied that pressure there. And then knowing that your business has the capacity to then, serve those patients or customers, depending on what your business is. And that there's a bit, I don't want to call it a science, but it is, you can't over science it. We also have to, there's a spirit, right? And so it's really funny, as the business owner, not only do I have to have my math right, meaning that I have to understand those formulas, I have to have my prioritization right, what this year, it's anticipating. And what these formulas do is they help you to anticipate and see where there will be an inevitable problem. So for instance, we can predict a capacity problem pretty easy. We can predict a lack of space pretty easy. We can predict a downturn in team engagement pretty easy. And once you can step back and see these formulas, growing the business becomes a lot easier. Now, the problem is most of you don't know these formulas because you've never been taught the formulas. So the key here is that you've got to step away from the practice a little bit. You've got to get a pen, get a calculator, and take a couple of days and let me teach these to you. And then once you possess these, they're a very powerful, almost like an antidote to the chaos of the world, which can sometimes be very deceiving, right? So, a lot of times when I interview a doctor and we talk about the growth of their practice, look, it isn't that they're not well intended. It's that the truth is that they're allowing things to distract from them prioritizing their time to what are the things you have to do to have your best year ever? And I think the challenge with that is it makes having your best year ever the next year that much harder. But when you understand that growth is formulaic and you understand those formulas, and I will tell you that, we start by teaching you the formula, then you have to develop a confidence and a belief and faith in the formula. And that takes a little bit of time. And usually, that's sort of what happens if somebody changes their diet and then they get on the scale and they see progress, then they get excited and so on and so forth, right? So it's very similar in growing the practice. So one of the things that, and by the way, you also have to have the self-discipline. And then this is what's funny. So you're telling me that in the busiest quarter of the year, I also have to have the self-discipline to take 2 days off and go learn this? That's exactly what I'm saying. And that's why most people can't do it, right? It's like they're just so fixated on the current needs and what's in front of them. That's why they can't make every year their best year ever. And I do think this is very much about momentum, and this is very much about countering the limiting beliefs that we develop over the course of a year when we are in our business by ourselves. Like, you are probably developing limiting beliefs just over and over and over again. And, the only way to break down those limited beliefs is number one, you have to identify them. And number two, you have to have a system for it, right? So if, like a lot of people may not realize this, but if you go into a year without the intention of having your best year ever, why would you have your best year ever? And then you start finding reasons why not to. And then all of a sudden, you lose an office manager and you're like, oh, I lost my office manager. Or, you lose an associate doctor and now that's your excuse for not having the best year ever. So it is really, really critical that at this time of year, right, we are juggling what to do year end financially. We are juggling the fact that depending on how your schedule went, if, for instance, if you weren't good at conserving energy, you start going into, tired, right? In football, you'll hear that like, oh, their hands are on their hips, they're basically trying to say you've worn them out. And so part of having your best year ever is never, ever, ever running out of energy at the end of the year. So actually, like for my clients, this is go time, right? This is like, oh man, I've got to assess where I am. I've got to finish the year strong. We've got to create a vision, something exciting. Usually it's a campaign, so for instance, my campaign for next year for my team is going to be, we're having this play the game contest, right? And it's about trying to turn work into fun and make it fun. And whatever you do in our company, make it a game. And so why a game? Well, because games have scores and in a game you prepare, in a game if you have a game you practice, and because really life and business is a lot about that. And so, but just as an example, right? So I'll kick off this whole campaign inside my company. And it just, imagine for every employee all of a sudden saying the campaign is just play the game, play the game, play the game. What game? The game you play. What game do you play for us, right? And great, what do? We play the game. So, okay, we got to get coached, right? I'm just giving you an example off the cuff of something. So this is another part about, where I will show you how to actually get your team members engaged at a new level. It was funny. I was doing Pilates this morning. I have an instructor comes into my house and she dropped a little like, there are no shortcuts in life, and I don't know what I was doing, if I was not holding my abs the right way or something. And, I thought about that and I thought, okay, that is true. And it is also not true, right? So meaning that when I agree 100%, there are no shortcuts in life, but there absolutely are secrets. And once you know those secrets, perspective changes, right?
You listen to Jay Geyer on the Private Practice Playbook podcast, but what if you could spend 2 full days with him live and in person? On December 4th and 5th in Atlanta, you'll have that chance at the Make 2026 Your Best Year Ever event. This is your opportunity to step away from the day-to-day, work directly on your practice, and walk out with a clear, actionable plan to make 2026 your most profitable and fulfilling year yet. You'll learn the strategies Jay has used to help hundreds of private practices multiply growth and take control of their future. Every time Jay hosts this event, it sells out, and this year will be no different. So don't wait. Call 470-410-2875 or go to www.bestyearinpractice.com/podcast right now to reserve your seat. That's www.bestyearinpractice.com/podcast to make 2026 your best year ever.
So I think when you think about what it's going to take to have your best year ever going into 2026, you got to let me lay this out for you. And I can't do it in a podcast because it's too comprehensive. In other words, and I actually taught this event for many, many years. I don't think I did it last year, but it's one of my favorites. And I just got invigorated about the fact that, wow. And it's almost like it's like a duty to the profession for me to teach this. And I've done it over many years, and it has changed lots and lots of lives, right? Once you learn that system, I can't take it away from you. You know it. So listen, here's the bottom line, right? You have a lot to do, but you got to do what's most important. So setting up next year. So I'm going to provide information. Let me go ahead and tell you. So it's actually the 4th and 5th of December, which is the Thursday, Friday. Just an FYI, that Saturday, it would be in Atlanta, and it's the SEC championship game. So if that's something that interests you, not that that interests everybody, but that game would be in town and on the 6th. So 2 days. You got to get yourself a ticket to Atlanta. And the way that works is you fly into Atlanta and you'll get to come to my training facility, which is the world's most convenient training facility. And you'll see that because all you have to do is hop off the rental car train, go to your hotel, bam, you're right at my building. So this is an invitation. And so I want to show you. So if you want to grow your practice and you've never been to any of our things, this is like going to be a treat, right? From me to you. There'll be a small nominal fee, nothing crazy, but you can come in, and in those 2 days, I'm going to map out for you a how to have your best year ever formula, okay? And then that formula will set up 2026, but it really could potentially set up the next 10 years of you having your best year ever, and remember, you have to keep in mind that moving the horizon is critical, meaning that so it's like once you've seen the view on the 10th floor, you can't take it away, right? But somebody's never seen the view of the 10th floor. And number one, you've got to extract yourself out of the chaos, right? So I don't know if you want to call it a challenge, if you want to call it, and maybe just for fun, I'll share maybe at that event, I'll share some of the theme that I'll use specifically next year with my team, just for fun, about how you make a campaign. And so take some deep breaths, right? Take some deep breaths. You're overstimulated, meaning too much phone, too much computer, too much of whatever. And that's why you have to shut that down, and you have to come into a room with me and just concentrate your mind on specialized knowledge, right? Which is, so when you talk about how do you have your best year ever every year, that is very specialized knowledge. I mean, it is a high value. And I just don't know how many people could actually deliver on this to you, but I know I can. So I wanted to personally take this podcast, challenge you, and let this end of the year be the most engaged you've ever been. We're going to finish strong which is you're going to keep your head down. You're going to get something on your calendar that's going to make sure next year is going to be a great year and have you highly motivated going into next year. And then we got to take the time to realize that you are the only person who can control whether you're going to let your team have the opportunity to be more engaged. I cannot walk in the doors of your office and put an engagement system in place and force it on your people. You control that just like I control it, right? Nobody can come into my office, motivate my team members unless I'm willing and able and compliant with that process. And I know, remember, we talked about this, right? What are the number one excuses? I'm tired. Nope. No. You need to be on fire till the end of the year. No tired. We don't have time for that. The other one is I don't have time. Time has never changed. That's total BS. That's in your mind. And then the third one is I don't have money, right? So listen, anytime somebody says I don't have money for something, that is exactly the time you have to change. That is ridiculous. Means like compromise. When you start saying, I don't have money, I can't be away from the office, you are heading to a place that you do not want to go. It is depressing. It is not fun, and remember, we call it the place where you don't have margin of time and margin of money. So like today, okay, I will guarantee you if you get registered to come to my event, How to Make 2026 Your Best Year Ever, and you could bring a spouse, would be ideal if they're involved in the business and, which it's a family business. So, and you lock down, you give me those 2 days. I mean, I guarantee I will blow your mind and you will walk out of there with a different understanding of what it takes to grow your practice. Now, you got to remember, I've done this in thousands and thousands of practices all over the world. And you have to realize that when somebody comes in that I've never met, I mean, we got to break down the limiting beliefs. You have a lot of limiting beliefs about what it is you think you can and what you can't do. And because I have done this so many times, I mean, I know the formula. I know the formula to get a doctor in a $1 million practice to end up with an $8 million practice, right? And every doctor with a $1 million practice is convinced that having an $8 million practice is going to be, so hard. It's not hard. It's better. And sometimes I got to take the guy with $8 million practice and get him to see that he can have a $10 million practice. So don't feel, right? So like, I want you to imagine a safe place. Like there's not a lot of safe places for you. That's why you got to get out of town. You got to come to Atlanta. You got to book a hotel room. You can come in on a Wednesday night, late as you want, work all day Wednesday. Get up, walk right across the street. I spend all day Thursday, all day Friday. You can catch a flight out of there Friday or spend the weekend in Atlanta. You can go do shopping. You can go to a football game on Saturday, whatever you want to do. There's a lot going on, but it will be a life-changing event for you. And it may feel counterintuitive, but this is one of I have these franchise events, and this is one of them, right? This is one where you go, if you ever met a person who had been to one of Jay Geyer's How to Have Your Best Year Ever events, right? I can promise you it had an effect on them. So and look, I want you to have the best possible life and the best possible practice. And I got no reason not to give you everything you need to be able to do that. So what I want to have happen is for you to go and to get registered. And on the morning of December 4th, I want to be looking at you, right? And I don't have, we have somewhat limited seats because we're actually going to do this inside of our facility. And it's not an unlimited seating arrangement. So you got to get them while they last. So anyways, let's make 2026 your best year ever. And then let's also set up 2027, right? And let's get you some really clean and clear and simple guidelines on where you should be putting your attention, where you should not be putting your attention, and have an opportunity to learn the truth about scaling your business and to quit thinking and listening to people who say you can't do it. You guys are being bombarded by these schmucks who want to tell you that, you can't run your own practice. You've got to be in one of our groups. If you believe that lie, and you got to remember this, I just did for my customers, recording on self-limiting beliefs. And one of the things in that recording that I was talking about was the fact that, not only do people generally have self-limiting beliefs, like you do for sure, I do for sure. And some people figure out that that's something you have to work on your whole life, but people prey on self-limiting beliefs. That is what they prey on, right? So when you got to know when someone's preying on your self-limiting belief. I've sold a lot of my houses by owner, and it's funny when you put up a sign and a real estate agent will call you and they'll say, "Oh, you'll never be able to sell your house." They're preying on you, and they're preying on you because they want you to list the house so they can make 3 to 6% on the sale. And so this happens a lot, man. People prey on people's self-limiting beliefs, right? And I got news for you. I don't do that. I do the opposite of that. And that is that I enrich people's lives and I develop in God gave you an incredible mind. God gave you a practice. God gave you employees, right? You got everything you need. You got a nice family and you have an education. And do we need to figure out how to pay off your debt? Not a problem. Do we need to figure out how to get a great team in your practice? Yeah. Do we want to figure out how to attract really great patients that you actually like and they appreciate you? Sure. All that stuff can be done. And this is a wonderful profession. And, I was laughing. I got an email from a client. He had sold his practice. We can never say names because they'll sue you. So, and it's in the non-disclosure clauses, but it was kind of funny. He sold it and he was just sort of saying to me that, hey, I'm still the one that has to grow it. So if you buy that fantasy that somebody else is going to step in and grow your business, I would challenge you to, why don't you first try to learn how to do it yourself, right? It's so, I don't want to say pathetic, but I don't know. Maybe I think it is. I think it's pathetic when somebody gives up on their dream before they try. And one of the things I can help you with is to clarify what does try even mean, right? Because it's actually, you don't have to try, you just have to do certain things. And those things have been figured out by people in front of you, but you have to get in the right room with the right people, with the right information. And I know you think you have, but I would challenge that and say, I doubt it. So I will guarantee you that this 2 days will be the best 2 days you've spent all year long. Any lesson, any seminar, any workshop, best you've spent, okay? Literally. So, okay, it is a great pleasure to get to speak with you guys. And so we'll keep the information coming, but really important that this date is racing up on us. And we got to be thinking about next year. Okay, appreciate you. I look forward to seeing you in Atlanta in December. Bye.
So remember, your best year ever doesn't just happen. It's something you create. And it starts with putting the right priorities systems and formulas in place before January 1st. If you're serious about making 2026 your best year ever, join Jay in Atlanta this December for 2 days that could change the trajectory of your practice and your life. Go to www.bestyearinpractice.com/podcast to reserve your seat. Thanks for listening to the Private Practice Playbook. Be sure to follow, rate, and share this episode with another growth-minded doc in your circle. New episodes drop on the second and fourth Thursday of every month, so stay tuned and make sure you're following the show to keep your mind and your practice growing.
Thanks so much for checking out this episode of the Private Practice Playbook. For clips of this episode, go ahead and check out the YouTube channel. If you enjoyed what you heard today, make sure to subscribe to the podcast at podcastfordoctors.com to unlock subscriber-only bonus episodes. Find our links below in the description.